do her magic.
Great to know. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all. I'm not a morning person, so I need the energy of everybody in the room. Good morning.
Good morning.
So yeah, thank you so much, Paula, for the lovely introduction. And also thank you to Matt Prang for graciously hosting us here today, and this event and all the work that you've done. So really appreciate that. And I'm excited to be moderating the discussion today. And a very important discussion around green jobs and green skills for youth. So on behalf of, and I'm doing this on behalf of the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, which I am a youth advisor on behalf of SOS International. And the Green Jobs for Youth Pact is a Stockholm 50 legacy initiative that brings together combined strength of 3 UN agencies, the International Labour Organization, ILO, the UN Environmental Programme, UNEP, and the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, to tackle the green skills deficit and advance the just transition to low-carbon circular economy. And the pact aims to create 1 million green jobs for youth, but also greening 1 million more, and also creating 10,000 entrepreneurial opportunities in the green industry. So, but according to research published last year by LinkedIn, many of you are probably aware, even though there is an overall slowing globally in the jobs growth since 2023, there was a 15% increase of jobs requiring green skills. The marked increase was demonstrated across 48 countries where the research was conducted, and the research also found that the rate of green jobs growth is twice of that in non-green job industries. And yet, just in 1 in 8 workers highlight having green skills, and despite that, even within that number, only 62 women for every 100 men showcase green skills. So a number that is stagnating since 2015, as the green talent is growing in the same rate amongst men and women. So in order to deliver a just transition, we must all ensure that people have access to green skills and can benefit from the opportunities afforded by green jobs. As a just transition, as ILO states, it's about greening. My voice, don't like that. It's about greening the economy in a way that is fair and inclusive as possible for everyone concerned, and creating decent work opportunities and ensuring that no one is left behind. So we must recognize that the impact of climate change will destroy livelihoods worldwide, and that the effects of the climate change and environmental degradation most disproportionately impact the most vulnerable within our society. Actions to combat climate change can relate to create millions of jobs in high quality jobs, but we must ensure that these opportunities are accessible to all by investing in education, working across policy and industry, and engaging young people in the heart of the conversation. So, it is essential that young people are equipped for the jobs of the future, and their skill sets reflect the type of economy and society that we wish to live in. Furthermore, there's a huge racial disparity within many Western countries in accessing careers in sustainability. In the UK, we've done some research, and environmental management is the second least racially diverse profession. Just last week, we hosted the Race Summit, which is the first ever summit focused on transforming racial inclusion in the environmental sector specifically. Through our race report, we are driving transparency in the environmental sector around racial inclusion, pay equity, progression for people in colour in sustainable careers. This needs to be equity and social justice, of course, that extends globally too. I recently found an organisation called Somali Sustainability alongside some other members of Somali diaspora in the UK. The climate crisis is already having a devastating impact in Somalia. Recurrent droughts, flooding, damaged crops, livestock leads to chronic food insecurity, and 1.3 million people being displaced just last year alone. The climate crisis is directly threatening Somalia's socio-economic progress. It is a young country though. Most of the population are under age of 30, and an enormous hope is that the fact that we truly just transition in a green economy, it would protect those livelihoods and also allow, as well as affording economic prosperity and opportunity for those who need it the most. In one of the critical ways in which we can achieve a just transition through education, we can educate ourselves of the crisis, but right now, many parts of our education systems are simply just not fit for purpose. So last year, we worked with young people worldwide, assessing the world's so-called top 20 universities on how their engineering, their law, their economics, politics, health courses align with actions needed to tackle the climate emergency and the ecological crisis. This was called the 1.5 Degrees campaign, which emerged from young people who attended things like COP, We saw time and time again highly educated people making genuinely poor decisions for our collective future. As David Orr put it back in 1994, the truth is that without significant precautions, education can equip people merely to be more effective vandals of the earth. So how is it that those who had what we call a world-class education are actually being equipped to be greater vandals of the earth? In the UK, we're working to repurpose education systems around climate and the ecological emergency. And we support student-led campaigns called Teach the Future, who have had a headway in the government and saw the first ever youth-led bill for climate education tabled in Parliament, a bill that was written by young people. And yet, we have such a long way to go. Later this summer, we'll be publishing a research that shows that most students in geography are still being taught the benefits of are still not being taught the benefits of climate change. And it would be laughable if this wasn't true. We urgently need our education system to realign with our planetary systems. We are doing what we can to engage in students and young people in driving change, but we must work in partnership across policy, in industry, in education to radically shift how students learn. Over the past 6 months, SOS International have been delighted in working in partnership with UNEP to facilitate a major youth-led consultation, which we'll be launching today. And I've had the joy of working with local youth reps in 5 continents to engage nearly 1,000 young people in defining what green skills are and what green jobs are and what it means to them, and aligning these key actions to policymakers, to educators, and to industry. So I would like to now invite my colleague Quinn, Director of Education at SOS, to join me in presenting the outcomes of the consultation.
All right. Thank you so much, Sandra. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. This marks such a very, very exciting moment in this journey, in this collective journey of deepening our collective understanding of how young people worldwide understand green skills and green jobs. So as Sam's just said, we've done a global youth consultation facilitated by SOS International in partnership with the UN Environment Programme in support of the Green Jobs for Youth Pact over the last 6 months. And the aims of that consultation were firstly to explore how young people actually define and understand green skills and green jobs around the world. Secondly, we wanted to develop a shared understanding of green skills and jobs through the adoption and the creation of youth-led definitions for these 2 terms. And finally, through this process, we wanted to empower and support young people to actually be real advocates for green jobs, whether that's in their schools, their communities, with policymakers, with industry, at a local, regional, and national level. Our methodology was really to work through our network of youth leaders worldwide. So what you'll really see in the outcomes and in the report itself is an enormous diversity in the way in which this research was even conducted. We really empowered young people in each of the 5 regions to say, what's going to work well for you? So the methodology looks creative and different. The ways in which young people actually led that consultation was really diverse and varied. And it was really exciting to actually see young people, when given the opportunity, to actually really take this and steer it in a way that made sense for them. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview of what that consultation looked like, what the outcomes looked like, to give us a starting point for the discussions today. But I'd really encourage you, you can use the QR code on the screen to also download the report. It's live as of this morning, so you can take that away after today. I'll just say the participants in this research were all aged 18 to 35 and represented 1,108 participants across 43 countries. So you'll forgive me, I want to be really respectful of timing today, so I'm just going to whiz through a bit of an overview of what those outcomes looked like. So first of all, our Africa Regional Coordinator was Bismarck from Ghana. He facilitated an in-person workshop in Kenya with over 500 participants. Really interestingly, the key themes coming out of Africa were around links between green skills and green jobs with natural resources industries like energy, agriculture, manufacturing, and mining, and really picking up on the importance of appropriate training and education. Next to Asia, our colleague Mana from Japan facilitated a workshop with over 50 young people representing 10 countries at the Global Sustainable Development Congress, run by our friends at Times Higher Education in Bangkok. And there was a really strong message that all jobs can be green jobs, picking up on a really diverse range of disciplines across urban planning, entrepreneurship, medicine, the arts, and more. Then to Europe, we facilitated a workshop at the SOS International Summit in the Netherlands earlier this year, and where, again, young people were saying, perhaps that not all jobs are currently able to be green jobs, but they can be oriented towards being green jobs in the future, and that should act as a North Star for us. Then to North America, our brilliant lead there, Ashwarya, worked with a broad team of other student leaders and really ran with this. I know we've got some of those student leaders possibly in the room, but certainly with us online. And in North America, there was a really interesting, strong message around environmental connection and thinking about the natural resources industries like, again, forestry, mining, etc. Next to South America, Catalina and Sophia ran a series of online workshops, and interestingly, South America had really, really deep understanding of the challenges arising right now from environmental conflict and injustices in current environmental practices. And as a result of that understanding, they really came through strongly saying the importance of balancing hard and soft skills. Right, so soft skills they described as actually really understanding the social aspects of sustainability and social justice and societal aspects needed in a just transition. So with all of that, I want to share with you some headline outcomes that came through really strongly across those 5 regional consultations. So firstly, young people really understand green skills to be interdisciplinary and inclusive of both technical and so-called soft skills. Right? And maybe that challenges some of the wider narrative around green skills, which so often is very technical and very kind of STEM focused. Secondly, young people see the real potential for all jobs to be green jobs, with, of course, the caveat that our friends shared in that consultation. Thirdly, a really strong message that youth voice must be at the heart of decision-making and solutions, and that we need a really joined approach across stakeholder groups to achieve that. So hence this wonderfully diverse stakeholder conversation that we're having today. Lastly then, I want to share with you the youth definitions that were produced outlining green skills and green jobs. You can see those now on the screen. Green skills are the necessary knowledge, attributes, and competencies to create a fairer, more sustainable future for all. Green skills are interdisciplinary and must include both technical and soft skills, such as critical thinking, problem solving, systems thinking, and digital skills. Green skills are a golden thread that weaves through multiple knowledge systems, including STEM, as well as the arts, humanities, and also local and indigenous ways of knowing. Then green jobs can be described as roles that promote sustainability, aim to conserve the environment, and respond to the climate and ecological emergency. Green jobs will foster a sustainable future for ourselves and for future generations. We recognize that almost all jobs can be oriented towards being a green job, and that sustainability knowledge should be considered a necessity for every job description. I'm going to ask my colleague just to whiz through the calls to action, because we're going to come back to that also at the end. But just to summarize very briefly, for education, the calls to action really focused on deeply integrating this within education systems across all disciplines, making sure that young people are really equipped with the appropriate green skills needed. For employers and industry, there was a real call from young people to invest in green skills and green technology, especially with a local and regional focus, contextualizing that locally, and putting a real emphasis on sustainability through all jobs, not siloing it within particular departments or particular parts of an organization. For policymakers, there was again a call for adopting really inclusive decision-making practices that see young people at the table and facilitating and prioritizing that cross-sectoral sort of collaboration. So I just want to close by saying an enormous thank you, first of all, to the 1,100 plus young people who fed into this consultation over the last 6 months. A huge, huge thank you to the youth leaders in each of those regions who just did an absolutely remarkable job leading and facilitating those conversations. And in terms of where next, I'm going to say a few words at the end for where we're going next with this work in partnership with UN Environment across the Green Jobs for Youth Pact with colleagues at UNICEF, International Labour Organization, as well as the Times Higher Education for the Green Skills and Green Learning Accelerator. But I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Quinn. And it's really cool to see that actually come together. But we're going to, I guess, now building off that, kind of kick off the conversation. And we have Andrew with us. So we're going to, the first section we'll start discussing is education. And Andrew is the Dean at Cornell Business School and Vice Chair of the Prime Advisory Board. So great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to kick off with you and pose a question to you. How can higher education institutions equip young people with the skills and knowledge needed for green jobs to prepare them for the green economy? Which has really taken account into the report that's just been presented.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zamzam. I want to start by just saying thank you for allowing me to be here and to help kick this discussion off. What a great presentation, Quinn. Great work by SOS International. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to say thank you to Paolo and all of our dear friends at the Prime Secretariat. I feel fortunate that I get to work with them on a regular basis as the vice chair of the advisory board, and I know that my role here is to sit not just as representing Cornell University's business school, but I'm also kind of a stand-in for my counterparts at the 840 plus business schools around the world who are actually part of this Prime initiative, this UN initiative called the Principles for Responsible Management Education. This is a group, for those who are not familiar, this is a group of, I mentioned 840 business schools who have basically affirmed a commitment to drive forward sustainability education. So I don't know if there are business schools outside of the 840 who have not made the affirmative commitment, but I'm not representing them. I'm representing the other 840. So I know my role here, and I will talk a little bit about Cornell, but only as an example, if you don't mind, because we'll hear other examples, I'm sure, from the other schools that are represented here. When I read a subset of these slides, okay, Zamzam, there was a couple of things that were absolutely loud and clear, so I'm going to triple underline them for everybody in the room, because that was pretty fast, Quinn.
It was.
So number one, call to action. The report ends with a call to action. You can't ignore this if you're somebody representing industry or the government agencies or the educational sector. These students are basically calling us to action and show up and do something. So this is emphatic, it's clear, know that it's heard, okay? Know that it's heard. And by the way, when I saw the call to action, I did not just, as a representative of the educational sector, internalize the call that was specifically for the educational sector. I was actually watching what the call was to the others in industry as well, because that's so relevant to what we do in a business school, for example. So that's one. The other thing that needs to be a triple underlined in those presentations of outcomes is the interdisciplinarity of green skills. And this whole emphasis on system thinking, that it's not sector-specific thinking only, but the importance of this interdisciplinarity of mindset. And I want to come back to that as a point of emphasis for my comments. So number one, the fact that it's undervalued in the educational sector, I could not agree more with that. And it is something that I take to heart as part of my call to action, okay? So let me talk a little bit. You mentioned the LinkedIn report, which again, was very fast by Zamzam in her comments, but can I just commend to everybody in this room, this was presented at last year's World Economic Forum. It's called the 2023 Global Green Skills Report. you guys must have referenced this or used this as backdrop for the engagements you did with the students, as you should have. Zamzam mentioned a 12.3% year-over-year growth in green skills. That's sort of what they call the market penetration in the labor market on green skills. And remember, this is like 1 billion plus LinkedIn users, and they're looking at postings on that. So it's a pretty rigorous kind of analysis, pretty comprehensive in scope. How many? 46 countries represented in the study. It's quite broad, many sectors. 22.4% of the share of job postings needing at least one listed green skill. 1 in 4 postings. So 1 in 12 jobs, okay, but 1 in 4 postings having at least some kind of green skill. And this goes to the interdisciplinary part as well. Here's what I would say to you. Go read this report. It's about 25 pages long. But the part that's most interesting is deep in the report, to me, in regards to this point you're making. It's on page 23, and I made a note of this. It was a drill down in the EU and US only, okay? But when you actually look at the listed job skills that are most in demand, they are actually not sector-specific technical skills. And I think that's the headline that it seems to be coming back from the students as well as a point of emphasis for them. So the top 4 listed ones are skills related to climate action planning. That's an interdisciplinary skill. You could call it a management skill, but I think about it as sort of a systems-based thinking kind of skill, a broad skill, as opposed to a disciplinary, siloed, sector-specific skill. Another one is on carbon emissions, which is sort of a general understanding of the impact of like MTCO2 equivalent and just the whole concept of it from a measurement standpoint. Carbon accounting, now that sounds a little bit disciplinary, but I think it's a broad issue about measurement. And then carbon credits also getting a little bit siloed, but it's still trying to get at the sort of the bigger picture of it. And this is ahead of things like, and this is one of the things I think we were hearing from the students, technical skills like expertise in hydrogen storage or expertise in energy engineering. That's what I think that's what they're suggesting, is focus on the higher level skills. That's where the new opportunities lie. That's where the future is, as opposed to what we've been hearing in the past 5-10 years. So how does this relate to what we do in business schools? Well, and I'm going to represent all business schools here, I'm going to say about 25 years ago, most business schools made a big pivot away from purely sub-skills driven training. We still do that, right? Accounting, finance, marketing, management, services, operations. We still do that. But what we did was pivot to what we would call a much more integrative, interdisciplinary focus, more strategic mindset, critical decision-making skills, a real doubling down of those efforts. And each school will have done it differently. We would say, Cornell would say, we would represent ourselves as one of the pioneers in this area where, for example, in MBA education, 2 of our students, MBA students, are here present. We basically introduced what we call career-oriented immersive training. We call them immersions, shorthand. And we basically compressed our traditional core learning into half as much duration to focus on career-oriented immersions, one of which is in what we call sustainable global enterprise. We were one of the first ones to do this. But this whole concept of immersive learning was a real pivot point. And in each of your schools that you're represented here, I'm sure there are elements of this. There are different words: immersions, intensives, experiential, engaged. They have slight different variations, but they're all of that same form. They're project-based action learning. And what is really important about it is not just that it's a kind of a real-time, often engaged with an outside corporate in terms of a real-time project, but the design of it is that they're team-based and they're interdisciplinary in focus. So it's sort of, business schools have now entered into this world of interdisciplinary, general, integrative, skills-based training with focus on critical decision-making. Of course, we have it in the context of the sustainability focus, because that's an opportunity set. Not everybody chooses that. I'll admit that, right? Because one of your messages is that should be pervasive. Well, it's only for those who elect to be in that subset. So I'm going to conclude with a particular example, and then I'll come back and hit the high points. One of the things that we have done is created something called a Green Technology Innovation Fellowship Program. So it's a sort of a 6-credit-hour, sort of think of it as almost like a full year intensive learning experience for students that choose to go into this, okay? It's a collaboration with our Entrepreneurship at Cornell University-wide initiative. There are 25 students in this, 2 to 3 persons per team. It's not just MBA students, but students who come from the natural sciences and the applied sciences, who are actually working in labs, developing technology in the green space, right? We have one that focuses on this, and we have another one that focuses on bio-entrepreneurship, which looks at a lot of health-based outcomes as well. But I'll talk about the green technology one. 2 semesters, coaches, professional coaches from industry, and the focus is on product innovation. So it's not like classrooms and lectures and teaching. It's these students in teams, small groups of teams, are basically brainstorming the idea of a new product startup that translates into a startup, where you take the technology that's being developed in some lab over in engineering, over in ag science, and then convert it into a commercializable product that might be involved with a product, with a startup launch. That's the goal. The goal is ultimately to seek out seed funding. So here's an example from this past year. New product called Agrivoltaic Design Studio. It's quite a mouthful. 2 MBAs, 1 student from agriculture and life sciences. And it's a new scalable software tool that was developed over there in ag that's designed to optimize solar panel array layouts that are customized for certain kinds of crops. That is not, so one thing does not work for every kind of crop, right? It's customized for the animals that are reared on the land in conjunction with the solar panels, and also the equipment that is being deployed. This is really innovative, right? It's a newly developed software tool that is designed to optimize different aspects of laying out a solar panel farm on existing agricultural land. And it's clearly got global applications. They also factor in aesthetics, which is super cool. By the end of the course, before the end of the course, this past May, these guys had already landed a $25,000 seed grant from the Department of Energy. So that's like first round. You can't call it Series A venture capital financing, but it's certainly a seed capital to keep working on the idea beyond the course. That's the kind of the goal of the course. I have another example, but I'm going to give back the time. But intensive, experiential, immersive, action-based project learning is where I think the magic of this interdisciplinary kind of training is, and we're doing it some, we can do it more. I think that's what I took away from the report, that is affirming for what we are doing and what we could do better. So thanks for giving me this chance. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I mean, I myself come from a business school. I have an accounting and finance degree. And I think for me, what was very evident in a lot of the conversation we had and supporting the young people in producing this report is that actually the missing link is that golden thread through the entire education system. I do remember doing some rogue SDG related module that never really was integrated into anything else. And I think that it's the understanding of actually, like, if we are going to be thinking about sustainability and climate justice through a lens of, like, actually integrating into everything that we do, everything that we teach,
right.
It's going to allow us to think really differently about, like, what our education system looks like, and what our higher education systems are going to producing, and so it's really great to have your enthusiasm and excitement to really push that work. But I want to open up the floor for any comments, any questions, anything that you want to add to the discussion. I know there's some higher education representatives around the table in the room.
Okay, am I doing that right? So I'm at Cornell as an MBA student. I'm actually on the SDE board, and I'm also interning right now at a medtech company and doing a sustainability strategy. And I think one of the coolest things which I realized while doing this and realizing how much sustainability is kind of a nice to have in a lot of industries, especially in healthcare, where the priorities are a lot more imminent and a lot larger in terms of patient safety and health, is that sometimes you entering the workforce need to bring the tools with you. They don't have the resources within because it's like a plane that's already flying. They're doing whatever is already on board, and they're using that to keep the innovations going and everything. So whoever joins these companies needs to bring those tools with them. And at SG, like Dean Curley already outlined, we have these immersive experiential experiences with the the Green Tech Entrepreneurship Program. We also have these different clubs that work within micro-enterprise, and they kind of address those different aspects of sustainability that you mentioned earlier. And so you get an exposure to the various dimensions of sustainability and the tools to actually put them into practice. So when I went to this internship, first they were like, oh, you're from Cornell, you know sustainability, here's the project. And surprisingly, I realized that they don't have the resources internally to work on this, but they were looking for someone to come prepared with them already. So when the universities prepare these students and send them out into the workforce, then you come in with these enriched tools that you can come in, and the companies are ready for it. They understand that climate change is coming up. They understand they have to prepare for it, both at as a world perspective as well as financially. Things are going to cost more in the future, and they understand that. So they want people to come in with these tools and understand sustainability in the perspective of corporations and businesses. So I think it's incredibly important to have that education. And for someone who went into business school without that exposure, I just had a nice floating passion for sustainability, but no real grounded tools. It's really valuable to spend those 2 years gathering those tools.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
If you stand closer to the table, then we'll take the audio. Sorry, then the online participants will be able to hear you. Thank you.
All right. I'm from Liverpool, John Moore University. I'm working there at the research, but I'm from Trinity University. I'm looking at the space of advancement of technology because now the world is evolving very fast, and we find out that the youth they look more in the technology aspect of whatever entrepreneurship they want to go to, or whatever business they want to go to. And the curriculum is, I'm talking about from the educator's sector, the curriculum is so locked up to traditional system. And I also specialize in the arts, and previous research I found out that the youth are going away from that industry. And why are they going away? Because they found out that they, if they have to create this cup in a local way, they are going to spend 3 days. But technology is going to produce it in few minutes. But the university curriculum only gives the knowledge to create this in 3 days. So the youth, they sort of moved away. So I don't know where the green skill is going to come in to address the curriculum and the education system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. I know I'm very wary of time, and I do want to move us on, but I think to kind of highlight what you're speaking about, I think it's exactly what Andrew was sharing, in the sense of like the interdisciplinary learning and understanding, like actually how we need to create distancing, because we need to create people that can think outside the box, right? And like our education system was set up and should serve as a purpose of not creating people that fit into like the current workforce. Actually, we need to create people that fit into the future workforce, right? Are able to create opportunities for themselves to think outside of the realms of the boxes of actually the society and the world that we live in. Because the reality is we don't want to be living in the society we live in today. We want to be living in the best society. We want to be living in a more flourishing society. And it takes people to think outside of the realms and the structures that we inherit, to be able to think innovatively, to think creatively, and to also be brave enough to come into an organization, like you said, when you've just graduated, and to be like, no, actually, I think your plans are terrible, and this is how you can reimagine your entire sustainability plan, right? And now that takes confidence. It takes understanding, like, what the hell is carbon counting, right? What the hell is, carbon crediting, and then how does this fit into, like, the larger narrative? And actually, some of that confidence just comes with knowing, having the knowledge. You don't necessarily need to know how to navigate it. You just need to have the knowledge and not be intimidated by this huge data that sometimes can be thrown at you when you come to these spaces. And trust me, I've been there. I'm like, I see what you're saying, but it doesn't really matter, though, does it? But I want to move on to Kwasi and into the private sector. How can industry and employers become leaders in driving transition to green economy, and in doing so, ensure that the current and future employees have access to green skills in green jobs?
And it's actually pronounced Kwasi.
Oh,
I do want to start by just saying thank you for the opportunity. I've loved this session so far. Quinn, anytime I need a substantial amount of information presented in 5 minutes or less, you're after my first. It's a great question because, I view my role, and I represent Deloitte, specifically that our responsibilities fall into 3 areas. That corporations need to be heavily focused on, first and foremost, focusing on their own footprint. So what are the things that we're actively doing to minimize greenhouse gas emissions and simultaneously create demand for green jobs? So as I think about the way that we engage with our suppliers so that they understand fully the path and trajectory that we're on, and that the expertise that we need for them to provide in order to serve us does entail green jobs, does entail a green economy, and does entail them making pivots specifically with the way that they approach work, just as it will for us. We also think about this from the standpoint of our commitments and understanding and broadcasting to others that, like, not only are we going to lead from the standpoint of being transparent on the journey that we're on, but projecting so that, the youth of today can understand that there's organizations who fundamentally do believe this, and that there's opportunities for growth within those organizations and in their broader ecosystem. The second thing that we've been heavily focused on is education. And not quite in the sense of what Andrew has detailed here, but we've started initially with educating our employees. We are the largest professional services firm on the planet. We have 450,000 employees globally. So being able to educate our employees such that they understand that all aspects of their jobs can in fact have some element of green within it. And not just that, but educating them on decisions that they make in their lives and of themselves, so all aspects of their lives can be green. So bringing those two things together and telling stories not only by having them enabled and empowered to build a skill set that can in fact funnel into some of the opportunities that we were talking about in Quinn's report, and making sure that that's interdisciplinary. We teach people critical thinking, we teach them problem solving, we teach them storytelling. And in addition to that, once you layer on top of that the aspects of some of the technical aspects of the skills that they need to be highly successful, you do truly create leaders of the future. The other piece that we're hopeful on is elevating the voices of others who have been historically marginalized within these fields. And Zen and Quinn, you both have made reference to this. Through collaborations with organizations such as Project Drawdown, how do we tell stories so that people can understand beyond the world in which they live? And that's our responsibility as a global employer, such that there's understanding more broadly here. the last thing that we do, and I think that this is really important. You know, as I said, the first element creates, you know, a need and a draw for green jobs in the future. The second element really creates the education and the foundation to really be able to move forward and start to really engage in definitive aspects in educating oneself. But the last piece is educating an ecosystem so that you can bring a full suite of organizations to some of these unique challenges, and be that collaborations that we have with organizations such as American Forest, where we are engaging with them not only to bring their tree equity programming to urban communities globally, but in addition to that, also providing access to jobs so that people can have family-sustaining jobs as arborists, who historically would have been left behind as part of this transition. You know, it also, we've talked a little bit about, you know, entrepreneurs who are focusing on some of these distinct solutions, engaging in efforts similar to what we have within the city of San Francisco called YesSF, specifically around identifying sustainable solutions that can be brought to downtown San Francisco, backing those innovators such that they can continue to grow and that they can hire and create jobs for the next generation of environmentalists and more broadly youth that are focused on green jobs. So from our perspective, it is a multi-tiered approach. We feel that it's our responsibility to be a leader here. And I also think that it's fundamentally something that all organizations can engage in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you so much for that. And then I know Deloitte is doing a lot of work across the field. Even when I set up Smart Sustainability, Katie Armstrong, who is the global impact and social impact in Deloitte, is a part of our board and supporting that work. So actually, it's really incredible to see a corporate organization taking that lead in a different way, in a really radical way. But I would like to first open up. I know actually we have James with us. I don't know if he's on the call. James from the Aldersgate Group. If you can, do you want me to read it out, or?
You can also.
Yeah, I think James. I think we can hear you. Can we hear? Do we have audio?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Is it all good? Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Brilliant. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning in the room. Just to introduce myself quickly, I work for the Aldersgate Group. We're an alliance of businesses, including some of the largest in the UK, professional bodies, academic institutions, and civil society organisations. And together, we collectively drive for action for a sustainable and competitive economy. One thing I'd just like to add to this discussion point is to give you an example of what businesses can really practically do to support young people to develop green skills and progress towards green jobs. So one of our members is Siemens, which is a tech manufacturer, and they own and operate one of the largest wind turbine manufacturing plants in the UK, which is located in Hull, which is in the northeast. And they work really closely with local government and with local education providers to create a sort of resilient pipeline of local talent. So, for example, they install high-tech equipment within local colleges and also help co-design courses. And as a result, a lot of the graduates from local technical colleges go on to work in Siemens manufacturing plant. So, one thing that businesses can do really practically is just working within local government and with local education providers.
Thank you so much, James, for your contribution. I want to open up also to people in the room. Is there any comments, any questions?
I have a question. Yeah, hi, Archish. I'm also a student at Johnson at Cornell, so great to be here. I have a question for you, actually, Kwasi. So, in one of my classes on ESG investing, what we realize is there's always this conflict, right? In one side that you're trying to really push for sustainability, and you being the global chief sustainability officer, I know you have a lot of challenges. And on the other side, I'm sure you have clients in the oil and gas sector, right? Deloitte does. So do you ever sit down with them and have a conversation that, okay, maybe you need to drop some clients or you need to be a certain way, or is it not in your purview, you don't have that difficult conversation? Because I know that's a huge challenge sometimes, right? So how do you balance it?
It is a great question, and it's a question that I receive routinely.
Oh, right.
And I will say that, one portion of my role is leading our efforts on what we call responsible business practices and engaging with our clients in distinct ways that are aligned with our shared values. I would say, and I'd extend that beyond the oil and gas industry, for example, that there's many times that we're having discussions and making decisions on work that we will or won't do because it's maybe not aligned with some of the distinct goals or commitments that we've made as an organization. And so specifically going back to oil and gas, I would say that we've been engaged in numerous conversations associated with the transition of their businesses and helping them think about the other ways that they can extend kind of their capital, their business models, and their resources towards that energy transition that we see in front of us. And so our distinct perspective has, if we can engage with our clients specifically on work that is driving a just transition, we are all for it. It does not necessarily mean that we will do all types of projects with all of our clients, but that's something that extends far beyond oil and gas. But we are very, very thoughtful about that from a global standpoint. Also recognizing that there's distinct needs, across the world. Things that we might move forward with in the U.S. might be a very unique need if you're talking about, for example, the needs of South Africa. So having to balance the distinct needs of organizations and regions and of unique people, and particularly youth globally, while simultaneously helping people think about the transitions that are aligned with our commitments and our perspectives is what we balance on a daily basis. I actually have a couple calls on it later today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to read out a question that we received online. The joys of hybrid meetings. We face deeply interconnected systems failures across environmental, economic, and cultural dimensions. Forward-looking higher education institutions should recognize the need for an urgent shift to coordinated and collective responses, which necessitates deeper collaboration beyond our egos, beyond our logos, and beyond our borders. The question, what steps may we take together to prepare for and promote model collective impact across and beyond our sector? And that is a question from John North.
No, I think the question started with higher education. So, Andrew, did you and
I assumed it was directed to you. I wanted to hear John's question. The focus was on what?
So how do
nice redirect.
It was essentially a question about.
So we can tag.
Okay.
It was a question essentially about collaborating. So what steps may we take together to prepare for, to promote a model collective impact across and beyond our sector, specifically looking at beyond our egos, our logos, and our borders.
Go ahead. You go first.
I can start with that. Yeah. Now that I thank you for repeating the question again, I would go back. The position that we've taken as an organization is that all major investments and also efforts that we move forward with be part of coalitions rather than individual vanity projects. That the collective action that's needed to address these specific challenges cannot be a Deloitte-branded, event or opportunity in and of itself. And so if you think about some of the things that we've done globally, it has been extending ourselves beyond our industry to do things such as further creating and catalyzing a marketplace for sustainable aviation fuel, knowing that, plane travel is a heavy, one of our largest driver of emissions, and how do you collectively pool action with other organizations to catalyze that marketplace and increase the production of SAF. The other things that we think about are exactly the item that I've mentioned earlier with respect to San Francisco, right? That is a collaboration that we have with the World Economic Forum, with Salesforce, with Citi, and with 20 other organizations within the greater San Francisco area to really try to bring sustainable solutions and support sustainably, socially minded entrepreneurs in that particular region. So I do think that there is bright spots of organizations. As I speak to more and more people who have my responsibilities, we are thinking more along the lines of collective action, which I think is a pretty tremendous shift from where we were 5 years ago.
Yeah. I was going to echo the same. Ours, like yours, it's an incredibly competitive sector, right? We compete ferociously with each other as among schools for talent, for students. It's a very competitive sector. But we understand that to really affect change, and I think this is the core of John's question, whether it's a corporate or a business school in higher ed, there's no way to affect the kind of system-wide change that we all aspire to unless we lock arms, at least on some dimensions. We can compete when there needs to be competition, but when it comes to trying to affect change, no single one of us can actually do it. And I know, for example, Deloitte's commitment on this front is evidenced by their involvement with another group called Accounting for Sustainability that I'm on. Veronica Poole, Vice Chair, is involved with that. I get to sit with her and see the way they think about this as locking arms moving forward. Prime is a wonderful example of how business schools do exactly just that. 840 plus around the world know that no single one of us can make change like the power of the collective. And I think that's what I hope that the students that are part of SOS International and HESI would hope from us. And I think that's what John's question is getting at, but John North's question. So
yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you so much both for your contribution.
Great.
Actually, I mean, it really showcases the importance of not just the specific sectors, right? But like actually, like collectively, how do they all work together, right?
Right.
Especially when the interest, the space is competitive, or like extremely like a big disparity between like actually how do they work together, the way in which ways of working, even the language that you use in different spaces in the civil society and like private sector is completely different. When we talk about climate, when we talk about sustainability. I think a lot of that is really like marrying up those conversations, and it has to come from the willingness to want to work together. So thank you so much for that. And hopefully we can continue working together and lock arms in a way to really put together like really radical ways of thinking in different ways. But I wanted to use this to shift into the next part of the discussion, which is policy. And I'm delighted to introduce Lily, who's here as the head of partnerships for UN and for UNESCO. So Lily, how can policy interventions be enhanced to enable greater acquisition of green skills and accessibility to green jobs for young people? And additionally, what can be done to encourage cross-sector collaboration, just as we're discussing right now?
Thank you so much, Zamzam, and thank you so much, colleagues, for being here. First and foremost, congratulations to the whole Green Jobs for Youth tech team and the wonderful report that you just launched. I mean, the 5 consultations conducted by youth are really, really valuable insights into how potentially, UNESCO and the public sector can better align our strategies in supporting with what youth actually consider very important and very meaningful. And thank you for inviting UNESCO to chip in on this very important topic. Well, adding on to what Andrew and Kwasi mentioned from the education sector and the private sector, there are 3 main points that we really want to make. Number one is building onto the interdisciplinarity, which young people mentioned, which Andrew also mentioned with the approach from higher education. Achieving green skills and green jobs needs a holistic approach within the institutions, not just across the disciplines, but also across the different functions. While a lot of people consider, jobs and skills are part of the function and responsibility of industry and community engagement sector of higher education, it's not just that. It's very important to acknowledge that it needs to be strengthened through, for example, more integration of technical and soft skills of education for sustainable development through curriculum development. There needs to be more relevant and targeted research and innovation. There needs to be improved transferability of solutions from higher education through the support of entrepreneurship and incubation, and of course, better alignment of institutional policy and policy engagement with workplace development as well as national development strategies. So all those combined, it needs to go cutting across, and the whole institutions from the top management down to the student across all levels need to have this understanding that they have a role to play and they have the right to request for the support that they need in order to move forward with it. A very quick example is, for example, in university at University of West Indies, they have launched a green economy training program, not necessarily just on green education, but moving to green economy training program that actually offers vocational training, which is part of the higher technical training at universities, to support with sustainable agriculture, renewable strategy, and ecotourism that's very contextualized to serve the Caribbean region. So that's number one. Number two, it's very important that when we look at higher education institutions, we know that their walls are not closed. It's important to know that integrating climate justice into green skills and green jobs is very essential going across the border to the labor market and to the social impact where higher education graduates will eventually transit in. Andrew mentioned it, in serving the marginalized communities, in understanding what people actually need, at a societal level. And what we see here is a lot of times when we talk about climate justice, we look at the disproportional impact of the groups that are being affected. But no, that's not enough. It's also about the engagement at the design and the implementation phases for the equity deserving groups. Well, we read a very scary data the other day that in the UK, just 4.8% of environmental professionals had an ethnic minority background, comparing with the overall 12.6%, almost only 1/3 of the overall workforce data. So where are they, right? I mean, those people who are mostly affected, where are they in actually contributing to bringing the solutions back to the community? And this is a perfect, example on where the different sectors can join hands moving forward, addressing John's question. When the ethnic minority groups actually mention that their main challenge is that they have this barrier to entry and they do not see the career path once they enter the labor market. So, I mean, at institutional level, what they can do is, at the institutional level, what they can do is, very importantly, like what Andrew mentioned, we need to incorporate project-based learning, or at sometimes we can even call it field practices, into their degree program design, which can be supported methodologically by the professors, but definitely would need to be supported financially by the career office. I mean, you don't just bring the employers on board to the campus to offer jobs. You need to offer, for example, targeted scholarships to help students who have the needs with the access challenges. We need the private sector also to work with universities to really understand how we can work with the in-service employees already to potentially design certificate programs short-term, but on the other hand, mobilize the comparative advantage of the private sector in providing those mentorship networks and create a bond in understanding that they do have this opportunity to keep moving forward. And the third one is, of course, on the public sector, a lot of pressure. We saw the call to action that it requires a lot of investment. But when we consider investment, it's not just investment financially. It's also investment in terms of resources, of time, of the efforts making in bridging the gaps and really creating the bridges to allow different stakeholders to communicate with each other, to drive the economic reform and the national development plan together, and really, more importantly, seek for flexible pathways for people who are not in the formal education system, who are not in the formal labor market, so that they get opportunity to be skilled, to be upskilled, and to be reskilled with sustainable knowledge. And those investments will pay off. We have to believe in it, even though it's long term, we have to believe in it and have the patience for that day to come. And third, capacity building is what brings policy down to earth on the ground. Queen and I just had a conversation yesterday that we really believe that a lot of policies, they look really flashy and really hopeful, black and white on paper, but no, the work is not done until individual lives are actually being touched and changed, that through action. And action is really the only way that can move us forward. And if there's one thing that must happen to bring green skills and green jobs, our reality is training. It's training in various forms. And at UNESCO ESL, we have different open educational courses, and we have different boot camps that are targeting, for example, very specific higher education stakeholders on the interconnected topics of greening higher education. We also have different trainings that are operating on intergenerational modality, so that before students entering the labor market and before higher education moves beyond the wall of university, there's already this multi-stakeholder approach implemented. We also have specific programs that focuses on South-South cooperation and triangular operation, as well as some that specifically works with indigenous students and communities that are co-designed with young people. We're happy to share more information later and discuss more and see how, different stakeholders, especially young people, can actually be engaged in those existing programs. And if there's none that exist, let's talk more about it and see if there's any way that we can co-design something that can be relevant and fit. And to conclude, I know this is a very short intervention, but to conclude, I really want to address the question on what you asked on what can be done to encourage cross-sectoral collaboration to support this. Young people is the key. It is reflected in the report by young people, and it's all across, the discussions of the 2030 agenda and various UN agencies' priorities. It's very important to acknowledge that as much as we talk about partnerships, in moving forward, young people should know that you have the chance to make the changes you hope for, all of them. You may be a student today, but you will be the educator, you will be the private sector lead, you will be the civil society practitioner, and you will be the policymaker, and you will make that happen. So really focus on the actions, establish the trust, communicate regularly, make the efforts to find the middle ground, and work together at a human-to-human level among each other and with other stakeholders. And look around. I mean, no one is here alone. We're all here today, and we're all here for a reason. We believe in all of you, and we believe in us, that we're ready to support each other and move forward. And something that we mentioned at the opening of the HESI Global Forum on Monday is that it's not that the future is the young people. It's the future are the young people, and we have to move forward together and put them at the core. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lily. I think it's an important reminder, actually, one of the things that we've learned in the work that we do at SOS Discussion with specifically with young people in policy, is that actually, I guarantee you a policy is useless if it doesn't include the communities that it's going to impact, and it isn't done in collaboration with those communities in itself. And so that's one of the things that, actually, the Climate Education Bill has been so successful because it's been written by young people for them in actually shaping our education system. So thank you so much for highlighting that, incredibly important. I think working within policy, working within government is incredibly important. We work very closely with the UK government, and I know we have the head of the Canadian delegation in the room. So to put you on the spot and to really talk about policy, it would be really great to hear about actually from perspective what policy work is happening. And to be able to contribute to this conversation.
Very happy to do that. As usual, I've come in with prepared comments, and the discussion around the table, the questions, the intervention, I'm going to have to try really hard to stick to point. A few things. One of the realities, and it's a Canadian context that I think here is quite important. Education is a provincial jurisdiction. So everything from preschool, early learning, and childcare, even though we've intruded heavily in that space, all the way through to post-secondary education. It is provincial jurisdiction. So as a federal government representative, it is an interesting space. It's the same on skills training programming. It's provincial jurisdiction. And yet the federal government moves very heavily in this space, working with provinces and territories. So first is the complexity, and I think that speaks to John's, in his questioning, is how do we get beyond egos, logos, and borders? It's breaking down the silos between jurisdictions, levels of government, breaking down as well and looking at how to build partnerships with post-secondary education with employers. And that's a space there's
Sorry, just to let you know, you've muted the online participants. We can't hear anything.
All right, sorry about that technical.
No, that's all good. It's all good. It's just a comment. So not in employment, education, or training. And most of our federal programming is really focused on reaching those youth, so 15 to 30, who are in that NEET category, and also in particular those who are experiencing the most barriers to post-secondary education. So there's a heavy focus on Indigenous students, on supports to racialized Canadian students, to women, to the two-spirited LGBTQ plus community. I always run that one too fast. And so that is a real focus point, because the truth of the matter is, Northern economy is population aging. We have two sources for the labor market: immigration and youth. And we need to make sure every single solitary youth in the country has programming to support their access to continuing education. But it goes beyond that. In terms of post-secondary education, the importance of wraparound supports to students who are from the more vulnerable communities. I think Indigenous peoples in Canada have been incredibly successful in partnering with post-secondary educations to provide those wraparound supports, but it is critical. These are youth coming into university, coming into college, who are going to be experiencing, possibly for the first time, being away from family, being away from remote community. They do want to go back and take their learnings home, but there's a need for there to be the supports at that post-secondary level so that they have a space where they feel included, they have a space where their tradition and culture is respected, and they can practice, and the supports to help them make that transition. So that is another critical element in terms of ensuring we have more diversity of youth in post-secondary education, but in particular as well around the green skills. Like, that is essential. I would say as well, Canada is not a leader in employer-driven skills and training. We are so far behind many other countries. It is just not in the private sector bent, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, to look at skills and training as an important element that the private sector needs to be contributing to, so employees are getting a continual skills development. It's a lifelong learning approach, and in Canada, employers need to step into this space as well. Public policy can't fix everything. I think going ahead, one of the challenges for policymakers is the reflex to be responsive to political agendas and mandates, and the speed in which, particularly post-COVID, in which now political officials expect policy responses. And we've gone from 2 years to develop an income support program to we need it in 2 weeks. And when the public service delivers, that has now the new standard. It's great. It's no longer 2 years, but the challenge there is the limited amount of time there can be for what we call co-development, engagement, consultation, and not at the back end of policy, but on the front end of policy. So one of the things in my department, which is Employment and Social Development Canada, is we really use at the very, very first moment on everything to do with skills and training, labor market, all of our social programming, GBA+. So gender-based analysis and plus. So it starts at day one of policy development, that everything is looked at from the lens of the entirety of the Canadian experience to ensure that we aren't leaving someone behind, that we have not been inclusive in the policy development. And as heavy a process as that is, it still is a struggle to make sure that we're not just ticking a box, but that we have actually done meaningful co-development at the front end. And part of that includes ensuring that we have partnered with post-secondary institutions, with youth, with the private sector. So it is, it's an immense challenge. I would say if I have one plea, and I'll get in trouble when I get home, is you need to keep pushing this, but not just officials. You need to keep pushing at the political level. It is recognized there's a need for a seat at the table. You need more than a seat at the table. You need to be there in the bowels of government, in working with at the political level, from outside in NGOs, and also pushing post-secondary institutions to provide you with the kind of programming you need to be able to make the difference. And don't stop pushing.
We absolutely need it. Thank you so much, Catherine. What I'm going to do actually is open up the next segment, because I was going to open up for discussion on this particular segment. Actually, the next segment is a roundtable discussion for all of the topics. So anyone and everyone here, please give your remarks, any questions, but please do stick to no more than 2 minutes, just so we can get as much participation as possible. So anyone want to kick us off? Any questions?
So I had a question for both Lily and Catherine. So I come from a small country called Malawi. It's a landlocked country. There are a lot of challenges. There are youth that are super, super talented, but access to internet is a luxury because it's just so expensive. Access to higher education is a luxury because it's so expensive. And moving out of the country is just a dream. I am privileged enough that I was able to come here, so anytime I get a chance, I want to speak up for them. So I know you talked about collaboration with universities and these green skills. So how can we help those young people so they don't get left behind in terms of these skills and knowledges? Because a lot of these people, when they go to apply for jobs, they just don't have those skills. Like, you know, they don't have the knowledge. Like the SDGs are talked about there, yes, but it's just not something that's in the minds of those people, because the struggle is, how do I feed my family? How do I have the right to a decent life? And one of my beliefs that I live is the right to education should not be a luxury. It's a basic human right. So I just wanted to know, how can we uplift those young people so they know that they matter, that they also have the right to learn these skills and be able to stand with people from the West and, you know, people that graduated from Harvard and all these Ivy League colleges.
Oh, well, no, in all seriousness, you know, Canada is a country of great privilege. And even those who are not financially able to access post-secondary education can, because we have a Canada Student Loan Program. Now, you leave school burdened with debt, but there is a very low interest rate on it, there is loan forgiveness, there's a number of ways in which the state is supporting those who have financial barriers to education to get their education. There are scholarship and bursary programs. Federal government has internship programs as well, paid internship programs. As a country of privilege, the state has invested heavily because it recognizes how critical an issue it is to reduce the barriers. That said, there is also a recognition that there's a lot more we can do at a very local level. So for some of our more remote communities, it is really working with, for example, the Inuit in the north. What is it that we can use as traditional practices, traditional education, traditional learning, and merge that with some of the Western colonial learning approaches to be able to provide opportunities for youth that are not going to leave northern communities. It is their home, and yet that they can advance and find meaningful work in their own communities, because how it's been approached is not on a Western colonial educational system. But for that, you need the partnerships. And that's kind of the real key here. Who can you have as partners at a local level? And how can you work with them and incent them? Bringing the youth with you from day one so that their perspective is heard and what they need is heard. It's not for the faint of heart. So I certainly feel for you.
And Arpan, thank you so much for the question, and maybe so for everyone's awareness that it's not just you who have this concern. And I'd like to read out a line from 2022 when we had the Transforming Education Summit. So in the 2022 Youth Declaration, which is part of the youth input of the Transforming Education Summit, youth demand decision makers for one, among many of the actions demanded. One in particular said, policymakers should strategically invest in green and digital skills, policies, and strategies to enhance education, research, entrepreneurial opportunities, and decent jobs for youth, especially those who still do not have access to electricity, the internet, or legal access to online services. We're in 2024 now. 2 years have passed. Where are we at? What kind of progress have we made? And what kind of concerns do our young people have? I'm not going to answer this question, but it's a question to everyone. But it is a very great example to show there's so much that we need to do, and there's so little that we listen. So what we ideally should start is when we're doing the budgeting, either at the public level, or the private level, or civil society, or at universities, we look at the strategies based on what the young people, the future of our society, our world actually requested. I mean, there's so much. We always need resources. There's always so much that we have to put in the basic infrastructure for things to happen. There's always so much that we need to train, the professionals so that they can further train the student. There's so much to go out and do the visibility and people are aware of our work. But by the end of the day, down to earth, what is important to us? Working for the UN, we always say that we're always so rich in ideas and so poor in resources. There's only so much that we can do. And I recall every year 3 times from ECOSOC to a high-level political forum to the General Assembly, every single time we have to reach out to every partner we have and ask, is it possible that you provide some additional resources for each one speaker you send? Take one additional slot so that we can sponsor an additional youth from the Global South to join this conversation. And guess how many people are on board? I don't want to mention the number, but I do want to give some compliments to Queen's University, who have been operating with us on that model in supporting that. And we really hope what Canada is doing, what universities in Canada is doing, can be a good example to inspire other stakeholders to join this mission and work on this together. And maybe also to give some hope, not to lose the conversation like that, but also to give some hope. UNESCO ESOC has one of the model practices across the UN system, because we're one of the very, very few UN entity that has reserved a governing board observer seat for young persons, so that a university student rotating from the 5 UNESCO regions is involved in the decision-making at UNESCO in terms of higher education decisions. And we have allocated one youth advisor in collaboration with Global Student Forum, so that we will have one youth who will be working with us on each one major line of work or project that's taking place at UNESCO ESOC. We're very, very proud of it, not just because we brought the young people in or provided the platform, but rather we feel so honored and privileged to be able to have this alignment and serve the young people and the future where we hope to work together. So that's a hope, and we're moving into co-designing with Global Student Forum institutional integration strategies for youth engagement in a meaningful way, and we hope that as much as we cannot fund all the young people to come on site, we hope there can be a lot more young people who believe that the UN is doing something, have the trust, get engaged, and work out the policies that belong to all of you and all of us together.
Thank you so much, Lily, for highlighting that. I think it's an important reminder, because we consistently hear the impacts of the Global South communities, right, and the role and responsibility of the Global North, but actually that never really translates into action, it never really translates into resources. So actually the role and responsibility that we play in ensuring that actually money does reach and support and opportunities reaches those young people who are in need of it even more, and actually in the wider spectrum are going to benefit and going to serve a much greater purpose. If you look at it from a perspective, it's incredibly important. So thank you so much for your question and sparking that. I know there's Ashwari's got her hand up. Ashwari is one of the young people that led the Green Consultation in North America. And she has a question. Hi, Ashwari.
Hi, how are you? Can everyone hear me all right? Okay,
yeah, perfect.
Okay, yeah, hi everyone. First of all, thank you all so much for being here today. Unfortunately, I couldn't join, but I'm here online. And I just wanted to give a really quick remark with regards to, because I think everyone has been really talking about what sort of actions can we take for interconnected support for youth, right? We've been talking about, oh, we need to include youth, we need to continuously support youth, but what does that look like? And I can give a little bit of background really, really quick. I'm 19 years old. I just finished my first year of university, and I've been working as a climate activist and an organizer since I was 14. And I come from a background where, working in the green sector or working in policy or working in any of this is really unheard of, especially from where my family's from and because we're immigrants. And so I think one of the biggest crucial thing that any sort of stakeholder can do, which does really change the lives of young people who really want to make an impact in this sector, is financial support, right? And for example, I've been working in this sector again since I was 14. And if it wasn't for SOS UK, because I've been working for SOS UK since I was 15 in various different forms, and with SOS UK, I was able to step into policy spaces, right? So like I was able to attend United Nations Biodiversity Conference of Parties, so COP15 in Montreal. And through that, then I started working with the government of Canada, and we're actually working on a national framework on environmental learning with the federal government right now. And so it's like these sort of people who or these sort of stakeholders that really enable young people and support young people into those spaces that only can really support youth into moving forwards for like a greener world or even a green sector, and really looking at also community-based pre-existing youth programs. Because let me tell you, when young people in these spaces are working like 30 hours a week, crazy hours a week with unpaid. They're doing unpaid labor in these spaces within their communities. Now, imagine if these young people were paid, the amount of work that they could do is beyond our wildest imaginations. And so it's really important and integral to understand how can we ensure that we're taking this funding or the amount of money that we have and being able to invest into these community-based approaches. Because again, these young people, like as someone mentioned, they're really smart. They know what they're doing, but all they need is that support, and really ensuring that you're connecting to those people is incredibly important. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because we've been talking about action points a lot, and I think that's something that's missed out a lot, because a lot of young people who end up being in policy spaces are able to have that or be able to be on that level are often people who come from privilege, and low-income youth, immigrant families, ethnic minorities were often left out of the conversation. So having this support is integral for us to be able to be here today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Shara. I think it's a real reminder, actually, like, actually one of the things I'm very proud of that we do at SOS is we do pay and support our young people. So we have a huge number of student staff that are a part of our work, and their expertise is valued in the exact same way that we would anyone else that's brought into that space. And I think that's incredibly pivotal and a great reminder from Ashwarya, because actually the reality is the marginalized communities that we want to bring into these spaces are often the ones that can't afford to be a part of those spaces, can't afford to travel. Even if you're going to pay for their board and their flights, they're actually just being away from their communities often means that there's a huge financial detriment in being able to be there confidently and actively. And it's our job to take those barriers away in the same way you would in any other space for anyone else considered a professional. So actually, young people are experts in their own lived experiences, in their own education systems. So thank you so much, Ashwarya, for highlighting that. And actually, one of the things that we would push for is that anyone talking about enabling young people or engaging young people into these spaces to always do it in with that model, and to never really think about it as volunteers or like free labor, essentially. I know there's a question in the room before I go to questions online. At the back, yeah. Well, thank you for the space. Do you want to come closer so we can hear you?
Okay. Okay, should I stand up? Is that okay? I feel like kind of in the middle. Okay. Good chair. Right, so thank you for the space, and the topic is really, really interesting. So my name is Angela Ferraro. Okay, that's the microphone. I represent SOS Children's Villages International. We are here with a delegation also, including young people from our programs. For those of you who know, SOS Children's Villages is a global organization. We are present in over 130 countries. We care for children without families who are in that situation from a reason or another, but also for children and young people who don't have adequate parental care but still live with their families, either monoparental or so on. So yeah, we care for children growing up, but we also care for children in transition towards work. So green skills is a very important topic. But I think the point that caught my attention was the one you made on opening spaces for young people to participate meaningfully, especially young people from the Global South. And how do you aim to bend that system, which from my point of view is very, very unfriendly at the moment when it comes to the understanding for young people from the Global South to be included in HLPF, and you mentioned some different forums. So the two delegates actually left a bit earlier because they felt like they couldn't really understand what's going on in this room, and yeah, it's very fast. we adults speak with very complex terminologies many times, and it's of course really great to recognize the importance of bringing them in such spaces, in such rooms, but we also see how difficult it is, and we also of course need to brief them. Okay, what is the UN Security Council that this person said they should reform, or what is, so there are all of the different challenges to bring young people on board. So I just wanted to reflect on that out loud, and to also ask you about how do you see forward that the UN could bend the system so that it's youth-friendly, it's a safe space for young people from the Global South to meaningfully participate, as you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to take a question from online, if that's okay. I don't know if that's hands up first, but I mean, I guess we can take both. So we should start with Aisha. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Ask your question? Yes, we can hear you. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I've typed out my question. It's very long, so I can read it out if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'm a Moldavian, and I'm doing my PhD in the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. So my PhD topic is actually about the treatment of migrant workers in the Maldives, and I'm currently in the Maldives for data collection. And so this is based on what I'm seeing during my time here. And it's like we have a vicious loop going on where, because our higher education sector is not very developed, so a lot of students go abroad for higher studies. So they go to nearby countries like India, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and there's a lot in UK and Australia as well. And so a lot of the students who go abroad, they realize that, oh, they have better facilities abroad, and the salaries and the treatment that they get there is better as well. And this leads to either them deciding to get jobs there and stay there. When they come back, they have higher demands because they feel like they should get better pay, or they should have better resources to do their jobs better. But because we're not that developed a country, we don't have the resources to match the knowledge and skills that they come back with. And that, combined with the fact that Moldavian employers have the ability to hire migrant workers for lower wages and lower demands for a lot of jobs, and then for higher technical jobs, they prefer hiring, again, higher skilled migrant workers who already have the technical knowledge to perform the job, so they don't have to train fresh grads. So this has led to the highest unemployment rate among youth this year, actually. So I was wondering if you can give some insight as to how one may break this cycle.
Thank you so much. I think, Kristen, if you could in short, please share your question.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Kristen Hargis. I'm with the Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education Project. And there's been a lot of talk about green hard and soft skills, which I really appreciate, because green skill development is needed not only for jobs that are already out there, and the skills that are currently being advertised, but also to support green transformations, because we ultimately need to transform unjust social and economic structures. So what I'm curious to hear more about from the speakers or anyone else in the room is the work that's being done to ensure that the green skills are also geared towards these transformations in terms such as analyzing unequal systems of power, encouraging collective action, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I'm really sorry, Orla. I think we're going to try to get some very short responses. I'm going to time it to like 60 seconds. If there's anyone that wants to either respond or contribute, specifically looking at our speakers.
So I can give one example, and I'm sure that there are similar examples in other institutions. part of our action-based, immersive type of learning, experiential type of learning that we do is focused on sending our students in teams working with companies outside in the world, specifically in places like in Africa and in Southeast Asia, where they're looking at small and medium enterprises in a kind of a consultative extended period form, working with them to women-led entrepreneurial outfits or typically small and medium enterprise where they wouldn't have otherwise access to those resources. We believe that that's really important to inculcate in our students, that global perspective. It is, you know, that you can be critical about how these are short form type of experiences, but they're really actually very important and long lasting for the individuals, and probably shape their minds as they go off to become investment bankers or consultants or do other things in the world today. It's part of the exercise. I think there's a great appreciation for some of the challenges in many of these communities that they learn about and appreciate as they go forward. But that's just one example.
Thank you. Anything you want to add?
Not on that point, but I've been reflecting on what a lost opportunity it was that the representatives from the Global South felt out of place, uncomfortable, because the lost opportunity is ours, not theirs. And I think what it brings to my mind is the importance and in fact the foresight that when we're opening these spaces up for conversation, that is a dimension that we take into consideration. This is a very kind of corporate setting. It's gorgeous. But it also is quite intimidating. And we learned, in Canada, we learned this far too late in terms of how we, as a government, undertake discussions, engagements, consultations, co-development with Indigenous peoples. Meeting them in their space with respect and thinking through the importance of environment and setting so that everybody feels comfortable and able to participate. And I'm sorry. Like, I really do think it's what a lost opportunity for all of us here, and it's an important reflection. I'll take home as well as I think about all the different engagements we do with different population groups. How are we doing this? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am going to close and I'd like to introduce three colleagues who are going to be providing us with the closing remarks for this to conclude our event today, and introduce each of them and hand over to the first speaker. So our first speaker is JC, who's co-founder of StudyTest and the co-chair of Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. JC will be providing us with a summary of the discussions had today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I fight against air conditioning and I lost, so sorry for my voice. And I'm French, so sorry for my accent. So I'm co-leading HESI, which is the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative that we launched in Rio +20, so it's in 2012, which actually bring together all the UN entities working or linked to higher ed, plus different amazing stakeholders, and we have different action groups on ranking and ratings, on research, etc. And we are so happy to have raise the voice of the young generation into that space, because most of the time in higher ed, we always love to have young people because it's nice on the picture, but we don't care, you know what I mean? So having them officially somewhere and having you taking care of things which are important and start to work together, it's, I think, really, really important. I'm also the co-founder of StudyTest, but it's another story. Before working for StudyTest, I've been the head of sustainability for 15 years in a French business school, and I just want to jump on what Catherine said. I managed to do lots of things because I had my students pushing me, and I used my students to push my dean, push my whatever, you know. So I couldn't have done what I've done without the students, and not because you have all the solutions. We, as older, We have some knowledge, and I think the idea is not to see who is right and who is wrong, but maybe the solution, because we don't have the solution, maybe the solution can come from everyone. Since I work on sustainability, so quite a long time ago, I always try to understand why intelligent people are taking stupid decisions. And this is the case. We are living in a planet, and you heard Antonio Guterres a couple of days ago. You know, we are far from being on the right direction. So try to always understand why those people, if they are not evil, you know, if they're most of them are normal people. Of course, if you sell cocaine or weapons to kids, you know that you are not doing the right thing. But most of the crises are the consequence of normal people. You know, the people who actually create deforestation, label shy, you know, they just don't ask themselves the right questions. And personally, it's probably difficult to imagine, but I used to be younger. And when I was young, I used to smoke, and I throw my cigarette on the ground. And I throw my cigarette on the ground until I realized that, oh, this cigarette will stay here forever. So, of course, I stopped smoking. But actually, if we really want to have people taking the right decision, we need to give them, and it was what you had in the report, knowledge, skills, and mindset. If I don't know that the cigarette is a problem, you know, there is no chance that I'm going to change anything. Then after that, or if I don't know that there are poor people, or there are huge disbalance in terms of male and female, you know, I won't do anything if I don't have the knowledge. Of course, with that, we need to have skills, and what you have done, it's exactly that. There are some specific skills, because an engineer needs to do some specific thing, a lawyer, whatever. But there are some common skills, and I think it's really important, and the job that you have done is really, for me, crucial. The thing is, I would love to give a call for action for this new action group. I've seen, since 20 years, I work on sustainability, I've seen so many amazing people doing amazing reports, which have been read by the people who wrote it. So I think all the energy that you have put on that report should be used. And actually, I think it's our role, our common role, to find what we're going to do with this report, okay? How can we touch the head of the program? How can we touch each faculty? How can we touch, you know, ranking and accreditation? What is going to change? And I think, for me, what is important in HESI is really try to bring together people, as I say on Monday when we had this event at the UN. The richness is we manage to put people who don't speak together. We manage people sometimes who compete each other, but we have this kind of neutral platform. And again, it is just a shell. We have to do what we want to do with it, to put in it. But really, my call is really to really think. Let's imagine that in 3 years, we say, well, it was a success. This report, sir, what are our KPI? What could be this picture? And one of the call to action, we're going to present later today a faculty survey that we've done. If we want to change it, that's really cool to have a dedicated master degree. That's cool. You're going to touch 5% of your population, you won't change anything. But that's great. You will change the life of those 5%, and that's cool. That's really great to have one faculty doing a specific course. But the problem is most of the time is this person will be alone against everything which will be taught in the other course. So we need to work with the faculty, and then we have seen on the survey that we have a huge disbalance, a huge heterogeneity of the faculty. And we have to be careful to be sure that those faculty are able to take the sustainability topics as a systemic problem, you know, into their own goals. What does it mean when I'm a faculty in marketing, in finance, in biology, etc., etc.? And I think it's a key challenge. With the work that you have done, with the work from other groups, maybe there is something to play with here. And I just want to finish by really thanking you, and thanks all of you to be here, and thank this action group, because the idea is not only, again, to have an action group, but to have something which actually push actions. And I think what you have done is just the first step. You are one of the youngest action groups, so really congrats and thank you. Thank
you so much, JC. And then we're going to come back to Quinn to talk to us about the course actions on the report.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for all of your contributions today. I think it just really reflects the diversity of perspectives that came into the consultation and indeed responded so well, I think, around the room to the really clear calls to action from young people through this consultation. So I just want to summarize those things and really give a really clear path forward. As you say, JC, like, we are not in the business of creating a report that sits dormant on a website somewhere. We did this work through SOS International in support of the Green Jobs for Youth Pact and the Youth Advisory Group that leads and steers the work of the Pact so much so that it can inform the very, very core work of the Pact moving forward. So we're going to hear from Urmila at UNICEF in just a moment, but the work of UNICEF, the work of UNEP, the work of the International Labour Organization will be informed by these definitions that young people have written in their own language and in a way that is contextualized to their lived experiences. So I want to thank you so much for your remarks and for speaking on behalf of the young people who, even despite that, didn't feel able to continue to contribute in this space. And I think it's so important that we recognize that youth consultation and engaging youth at the table is about actually like handing over the ownership of these spaces sometimes. And each of those 5 regional workshops, like, so pleased that Aishwarya is in the virtual room here and others, like, those regional workshops looked and felt so different. And from a research perspective, the team had such an interesting challenge trying to draw together things with really different methodologies, translated from different languages, contextualized in loads and loads of different ways. But it was facilitated in a way that made safe spaces for young people to feed in. So a real shame that we missed a trick on making sure that this was as inclusive a space as possible, but I hope that spirit really came through strongly in the consultation. So I want to just summarize the kind of really key calls to action here, which is that in education that we're integrating green skills and preparation for green jobs into the education system, but in a way that is interdisciplinary, inclusive, and that honors students' lived experiences, in particular bringing in local and indigenous ways of knowing. So we heard this lots around the room, right? But green skills and green jobs, not thinking about it in a really narrow context, but actually contextualizing it in students' own lived experiences. From business and industry, this means investing in communities, and so many of the examples I think that we heard from Kwesi really exemplified that, right? Working in partnership with local communities to work on skilling, upskilling, reskilling the workforce and supporting young people into that space. And really importantly, that those careers are decent jobs, right? Decent jobs that bring about a good quality of life, good opportunities for people right around the world. And that starts in the way that we do this work, right? So I'm so proud that Aishwarya mentioned our investment and our ways of working at SOS and paying students the real living wage for their time and valuing their contributions and respecting their contributions in that way. And I think that's something that we need to embody in our ways of working in these spaces. And finally, really actively bringing together the key partners and acknowledging, as Lily and as Catherine both said, the really catalytic power of bringing young people into these spaces and actually using and working in partnership with young people to actually drive forward that change that I think sometimes in policymaking spaces, you know in your heart what you want to see happening, and actually working in partnership with a young person who perhaps can say something more radical and push the envelope that little bit more can actually nudge that more radical reform that I think we all know that we need to see. So I really invite you to use these definitions in your work so that we can really challenge some of these narratives and very narrow narratives that I think we see sometimes around green skills and green jobs, and do that in a way where you know you are speaking on behalf of and platforming the collective voice of young people in this work. In one very practical sense, we're really, really excited through the Green Jobs for Youth Pact to to be working with UNICEF, with UN Environment Programme, with the International Labour Organization, and specifically with our colleagues at Times Higher Education as well. We've just launched last month the International Green Learning and Skills Accelerator, and that will be a really key tool for bringing together young people, higher education institutions, governments, at a local, regional, national, international level to really, as the name says, accelerate progress around investment in green skills and investment in green jobs, with the future of young people really at the heart of that. So I will stop there. It's my absolute pleasure to hand it over to Urmila Sarkar from UNICEF. Urmila and I met for the first time at COP27, where it was the launch of the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, and it's so exciting to have you here now today to really round off the discussion. So thank you very much, Urmila.
Well, thanks so much, Quinn, for that. And you know, can you pop a mic in front of you? Oh.
Okay. No, and I'm deeply honored to be here, really excited to be here as part of this intergenerational dialogue. I still feel young at heart, but it's really, really important to have all of us together and really representing a wide diversity of stakeholders. And just it's great to speak on behalf of UNICEF, on behalf of also the Generation Unlimited, which is anchored in UNICEF, and actually represent, you know, UNESCO, a number of the organizations here, private sector, and what we believe in is that it's not only working for youth, but with young people. It's really about youth-powered impact, you know, that young people are going to know firsthand what are the problems and the challenges, but also how best to overcome that. So that's very much a philosophy behind, you know, everything that I work on, what we all do with the Pact, and just to emphasize some of those points that were earlier made so well by all the speakers. I wanted to bring in just another dimension to the whole discussion, and we know around the world, whether it's the global north or south, that societies are grappling with rising insecurity, with conflict, with inequality, with environmental threats, including climate change post the global pandemic. So we know we have all these challenges. We also know we have the largest generation of young people in history, and we also know that 1 out of 4 of these young people around the world are not in education, training, and employment. And we also know that the majority of employed youth are in the informal sector, often working in poor working conditions and less social protection. And I'm glad you made the reference to decent work, because we're not only looking for any kind of employment and any kind of green employment, but we're also looking for quality and productive work. So what I think we believe, and I think we all believe, because we're all mission aligned here, is that to secure a sustainable future for our planet and all of its people, the world must reach net zero. That's why we met at the launch of the PAC in COP27. And also, the question we face before us is, how will we ensure this green transition is a just transition? How do we ensure including by serving those who are least responsible, our young people, those most vulnerable, women, that they're most vulnerable to its impact, but how can we provide the agency so they can do something about it? And I think that's what we've been discussing today. And a lot of the young people today, the world's 1.2 billion young people between the ages of 15 to 24 are at risk of not having the green skills they need to participate in employment and entrepreneurial ventures. And so this is kind of what I wanted to bring, that additional dimension to the whole discussion we're having today. Now, the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, because I was asked to speak a little bit about what that's about, and now we're at the call to action part, which is my favorite part. So it's good that we discussed the issues. We know the challenges, and we have some ideas about the solutions with the amazing report that's been launched, but how are we going to act on it? So what this is, it's ILO, the UNEP, UNICEF have come together. Other private sector like Iberdrola, LinkedIn, other partners are coming on board, and we have a shared vision to create 1 million new jobs, the greening of 1 million existing jobs, and enable at least 10,000 young green entrepreneurs to start sustainable businesses by 2030. It's an ambitious target, but there's so much to do. And this pact is more than just a project. It's really about galvanizing a global movement that embodies our collective commitment and a just transition and boost decent jobs for a youth in a sustainable economy. And we know, Zamzam's been very active, and I'll get into that a bit with the Youth Advisory Group, but just to tell you more about the pact. Now, it's structured around we call them the 3 green E's. So one is around green employment and entrepreneurship. greening of education and skills, and also collaboration with the Greening Education Partnership, and green empowerment and youth engagement, which is, you're very much at the forefront of this. With the green employment and entrepreneurship, it's focusing on looking at what are the kinds of right policy frameworks to support job creation. So for instance, since the launch of the Pact, we've already seen hundreds of individuals and governments and social partners join something called the Youth Employment Academy. And it's looking at comprehensive training in employment policies for young people with a special focus on green job creation. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the programs that we're seeing on the ground. You talked a lot about experiential learning and project-based learning, super important. Actually, there's already initiatives through the Imagine Ventures, Youth-Led Social Entrepreneurship Program, Be Green, and others, where thousands of young people are being supported with this type of experiential learning and project-based learning at university level, at higher education level in the Global South. So I was remembering your comments from Malawi, and I think we can take these as inspiration. And through this, there's been really ingenious, innovative ideas in Nigeria with an initiative called Donate Water, where young people have come together on a project, a crowdsourcing tool to help detect clean sources of water in Nigeria. In Bangladesh, 3 young Bangladeshi innovators, they came together with an idea to use, there's a lot of traffic, if anyone knows Dhaka in Bangladesh, but to use that kinetic energy to form wind energy. And they've called their project BD Wind Turbine, which is getting investments. They presented at the Climate Smart Bangladesh Convention recently, and it's getting investors for their idea in Lebanon. If anyone knows the context in Lebanon, it's a fragile context, issues with electricity, and 3 young university students came up with the great idea to turn to look at alternative forms of electricity through biochemistry, through a project called Biosetters. So these are just to give an ideas to say that we can do it, and it's happening around the world, in the global north and in the global south. In terms of greening education skills, we have something called the Greening Learning and Skills Observatory, which is being piloted in Kenya, in India, and Latin America. And the initiative aims to integrate green skills into higher education, fostering a new approach. And we're hoping to create that into more of a global hub. And just the third pillar, very important, is on green empowerment and youth engagement, really looking at this fostering of intergenerational dialogue, and can we come together as HESI, as the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, and all Prime and all the organizations that are here to come together into this type of intergenerational support. Young people have really great ideas, innovations, and I'm a former, well, I don't know, I still feel young at heart, but I started out my career as a student leader, a community organizer, that lots of great ideas, but they just need the right support and opportunities and awareness about that. So this is what the Pact, the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, is trying to do. And people like Zamzam, we were just recently in Kigali, and the Youth Advisory Group are really trying to push that forward, actively involved in drafting resolutions, advocating for green skills and jobs. Quinn, very much, that's why we met at the COP27, and mobilizing partners in the forum. So how better can we all work together, whether we're private sector, in higher education, government, to support that and take that forward. And regionally, the Pact has also made strides in Africa, in Asia Pacific, Europe, Latin America. I won't go into the details, but happy to share on that. The report, I just want to say just a quick word to congratulate very much on the report, and just to say that you seem to be making more progress than the international community at finding a common definition for green skills and jobs. And it's very much aligned with actually what we've been kind of espousing at the Pact, at the Generation Unlimited, in the way that you look at the technical skills with transferable or softer skills. And I always say, looking at an environmentally sustainable skill set, whether you're in green jobs or you're in the finance, you're in Medicare, wherever. And that's kind of, I really like that approach. And I think we should come together, because the international community, and including the education sector, we do need to come together around some of these common definitions and terms. And really happy to take that forward. So finally, just to say, I think just as part of the call to action, that it would be great to get your active participation in the Pact. I think also what we're trying to do with this initiative, it would be good if we make stronger linkages with HESI and all the organizers around the table. You know, we must remember why green skills and green jobs for young people are essential. They're not just about employment. They're really about empowering young people to lead, to innovate, to drive changes necessary for a sustainable world. And we heard today the report highlights how eager young people are to be part of this whole transition. And I firmly believe that young people have the enthusiasm, the creativity to make a real dent in this issue and make significant contributions. And we just need to be able to help provide whatever resources and support and opportunities. So let's work together, and let's work together to ensure that the next generation, and this generation, as you pointed out actually today, is equipped with the skills, knowledges, and opportunities to have not only an equitable, but also a sustainable future. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to really moderate this conversation. And as you were talking, actually, I was reminded of something that was said during one of the youth consultations. And sorry to swear, but it was quite literally like, as young people, we're just sick of talking and we just get shit done. Right? That was really the resonance of the conversation that we had. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And I'm going to hand to Paolo to close.
Yes, I will be short in respect of time, and we can definitely continue the conversation for another hour in the pantry for networking. But I would like to thank all the participants, those here in this room, those there in the virtual room, also all the speakers, Yurmila, JC, Kwazi, Catherine, Andrew, Lily, Queen, my friend, and Zanzan, last but not least, for the amazing facilitation and moderation. I also want to thank HESI for opening the opportunity for the Student Action Group, and the Student Action Group that is not only the three of us, Iman's there also, Sam has been working here, and other colleagues around the world for coordinating efforts for this event. Thanks to UNEP, UNICEF, and ILO for the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. And my colleagues at the Global Compact team for working behind the stage, for making things happen. So please stick around if you're able for another hour of networking in the pantry. And if the speakers can give me 1 minute so we can take a photo together in the UN flag, that will be amazing. Thank you all.
No, it's not. I asked her. And it was thank you.
Oh, thanks.
People always say, there's other nice places.
There are.
You're based in Ottawa.